Well, welcome back, folks. Today we're going to walk through the truing of the front wheel of the little Yamaha YL1 you see mounted here in my vise. I'll take you through the process that I use to true wheels, which is quite simple actually. You don't need a lot of special equipment for this. But first we're going to do a little trivia question for you. Of the big four Japanese motorcycle manufacturers, Yamaha, Kawasaki, Suzuki, and Honda, which one of the four is the oldest? In other words, started business first? Well, the answer is Yamaha. Yamaha started business in 1887. Their primary business was musical instruments. I think we've talked about that before. Kawasaki is the second oldest. Started business in 1896, and their original business was shipbuilding, followed by Suzuki in 1909 and Honda in 1946. So Honda obviously is the baby of the group. Now Yamaha split Yamaha Motors. What we've come to know and love is the power sports part of their business, that being motorcycles, snowmobiles, watercraft, etc., from the parent corporation in 1955. So technically, Yamaha Motors is a separate business from Yamaha Company or Corporation. Though I believe Yamaha, the parent Yamaha Company, still has a controlling interest in Yamaha Motors to this very day. Well, let's go ahead and get started with the truing of this wheel. What I'll do is I'll reposition the camera. We'll get up here in close and I'll show you the basic setup and the tools that I use, and then we'll begin with the actual truing. I bet you couldn't tell that I was a history major in college now, could you? Let's first talk about the setup that I typically use. I'd like to emphasize you do not need an expensive truing stand. You could make a truing stand out of some wood like 2x4s. You can buy professionally made quality truing stands, and if I trued wheels for a living, I was doing this frequently, I might consider another option. But I at best true a couple of wheels a year maybe, and it's just not worth my time and effort to go to an elaborate setup. So I just use my bench vise like you can see here. I take the axle bolt for the wheel. So I have the original axle bolt going through the wheel hub and clamped in the vise you can see there. I then take the wheel and just tilt it ever so slightly outward like this at an angle I'm going to exaggerate, because I want the wheel to stay to the outside and not rub up against the bench. So just a bit of an incline, so the axle will sit something like that. And then I typically will use a dial caliper setup. This is a magnetic base that is clamped to the top of the vise, and then I just articulate the arms out with a dial indicator on the end, as you see there. Now you don't need to use a dial indicator, excuse me, and in fact you could use a piece of coat hanger attached to the bench down here somewhere or in the vise, and bend it at an appropriate angle would work as well. In fact, years ago I used a piece of coat hanger. I used it for a number of years that I had rigged up for something like this. So you don't have to use a dial indicator. I use it because I have it available to me and it's easy to use. So before we start truing the wheel, I'm going to give it a spin and you can watch to see how far out of true it really is. You can see it wobble back and forth. You can see the indicator will fluctuate quite a bit. We have two planes we're working on, both the vertical, which some people call wheel hop, and that is the wheel will move up and down as it goes around. You can clearly see that here, as well as the side-to-side wobble that you have. So we're going to true for both directions. We'll start with the vertical, or the wheel hop, and I'll get it reasonably close, and then we'll reposition the indicator and we will work off the side. We'll actually work off the inside, but I'll put the dial indicator something like this and we'll try to true that wheel up. Now another comment on truing of wheels. My projects, this type of project anyway, is a restoration, and this bike won't really get ridden to speak of. At worst it will be used to putter around a parking lot. It will really never get used out on the road. So I don't true wheels to the nth degree. I don't try to get wheels to within a matter of a couple of thousandths. It can be done. It takes a lot of work and can take time. But for me, that's not necessary. I want to get the wheel reasonably true. And for a restoration project that will never get ridden in anger, it's perfectly fine. If you were out road racing or had a high performance bike and you're out on the road with it every day, with aggressive riding, then you would typically put more effort into truing the wheel than what you will see me do here today. Let's first talk about the tools that we're going to use. I alluded to this in a previous video, and that is the spoke wrench. This is the spoke wrench that I will be using on this wheel. You'll notice I put a piece of tape, blue tape. That's just a visual indicator, so I know as I'm working my way around the wheel and putting the tool down, picking it up, that I know which end is the business end for this particular project. You can see that number 10 right there. That is not the size of the spoke per se in terms of millimeters. That's the spoke gauge, or the gauge size rather. The nipples on this particular spoke set are 5 millimeter. So don't think that's a 10 millimeter because it's not. And you can see on the opposite side of the same wrench it's an 11. The only other tool that you might need is a straight standard screwdriver. This is one of my old standbys, one of my old Craftsman. I've had this for years, and I just love this screwdriver. I take good care of it. You might need that later on. We might need to use this, maybe not, but certainly the spoke wrench will in fact be used. To begin the actual truing, the first thing I'm going to do, and these spokes by the way are all loose. I have not tightened them at all. You can see there. They're all loose all the way around. First thing I'm going to do is by hand, I don't need to use a spoke wrench for this, I'm simply going to start snugging up these spokes. And what I'm attempting to do is get the depth of seating of the nipple approximately the same all the way around. You can see the amount of the spoke head that is or isn't showing. In this case, where my finger's pointing, the nipple isn't turned down very far at all. So as I'll just snug that up, and I will work my way around the wheel, snugging these up, just finger tight for now, until they all are approximately the same depth. Or, another way of thinking of it, the same amount of the spoke head coming up through the nipple showing will be about the same. That varies from wheel to wheel, spoke set to spoke set. What you have to do is determine on each wheel that you're working with, what is the relative level of tension that you want to apply. And I just do that by watching how much spoke is coming through the nipple. So what I'm going to do now is just work my way around the wheel, and I'm going to snug all of these up, starting by hand, and bring them all to the same relative depth of penetration into the nipple, so that the same amount of spoke head, approximately, doesn't have to be measured, just approximately, is going to be the same all the way around. So that'll be my next step. I spent about 10 minutes now going around and tightening up these nipples just a little bit. Again, I'm attempting to get them all to about the same relative spot in relationship to the spoke head protruding up through the inside. Now they're not perfect, and I'm not attempting to get them perfect. That is, they don't all have to be the exact same spot, but I want them relatively the same. So as I spin the wheel around, you'll get a sense of what I mean. So you can see some of them protrude a little bit further than others. That's okay. But I did want to get them relatively speaking in the same spot. Now all the spokes have some tension on them, not a great deal. Some might have a little more than others, but generally speaking they all have just a touch of tension on them. So there's really no loose spokes at this point. So let's see what, if anything, doing an initial tightening of the spoke nipples, that is to position them all relatively in the same position, has done for the wheel hop. That is the vertical movement of the wheel up and down. So watch, you don't have to pay attention to the caliper or to the dial indicator right now. Just watch the wheel itself and see how much hop it's got. And as you can tell, it's taking out already, we've taken out a lot of the wheel hop. Not all of it, of course, as you can tell by the indicator, but significantly we've reduced the wheel hop already, and we really haven't even attempted to do any truing at this point. So I'm going to bring this wheel around to the 0 mark right there, that's the low spot. In other words, that's the lowest point of hop right there. You can see I've already pre-positioned the indicator at approximately 0. So let's turn this wheel and see what happens. Around 45 thousandths, this is a thousandths imperial indicator. And we're up to about 80 right there. I'm going to hold my finger right there and rotate the wheel around back to 0 right there, which is almost, not quite, but almost the exact opposite of the 80 thousandths right there. So what that tells me is this wheel right there, this high spot right there we need to pull the wheel that way. We've got to pull the wheel down. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to snug up these 3 or 4 or 5 nipples right here to pull this wheel down. And concurrently, on the exact opposite side of the wheel, I'm going to loosen the nipples because I want the whole wheel to shift. You follow me? So if this is the high spot, I'm going to pull the wheel down by tightening these nipples and pulling down on the wheel and loosening the nipples on the opposite side, exact opposite side, to allow the wheel to shift. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So I'm going to bring this up to about 80 thousandths or so. So I know I want to pull the wheel down. So I'm going to just tighten a little bit. Like that. Now I'm going to rotate it around to the exact opposite side. And I'm going to make sure these nipples here are loosened up about the same amount, about 1/4 of a turn. What I'm going to do. Okay, let's see if we've done anything here. So we're going to find that's the low spot. Move it about 5 thousandths of an inch. So now we're going to repeat the process one more time. And we're going to tighten these spokes right in here and loosen the spokes on the opposite side. Rotate the wheel around to the opposite and just loosen just a bit. About the same amount as we had tightened on the opposite side. Okay, there's 0. And you can see we're at about 73. So now I'm going to tighten these. There's the low spot. Right there is the high spot. This is a low spot. And there's the high spot. We'll tighten these a little bit more. Notice I'm holding my finger right here. so that I can keep track as I rotate the wheel around, see if that corresponds to the low spot, and it virtually always does. Sometimes it'll move on you a little bit. Okay, that right here is the low spot. There's the high spot. So we just keep doing this process, working our way, tightening, loosening, tightening, loosening. Again, you want to shift the wheel down. In this case, you want to tighten these spokes and loosen the opposite spokes to allow the wheel to shift. That's the gist of it. about 20 minutes or so later, and I've worked my way around the wheel multiple times. And you can see I got the dial indicator zeroed out right about there. Not quite, but it's pretty close to zero. So as we turn the wheel, you can watch the indicator and you can see I've got it within about 20 thousandths of an inch. I think that's a high spot right about there, right there, and it comes back to zero. So I've got the wheel hop to around 20 thousandths of an inch. For this project, that's plenty acceptable given its intended usage. Now I'm going to reposition the indicator and I'm going to indicate off the side over here and see how much wobble I've got in the wheel. Generally, if you can get the wheel hop pretty close, like we have here, the wobble, the run out, tends to be less problematic. All the spokes, by the way, now are relatively tight. They're not bowstring tight, but they are fairly tight. Now we'll see what we can do with the wobble. Got my setup changed, so now I've got the indicator pointing to the right side of the wheel. And I got it zeroed out, so we'll rotate the wheel here and see how much wobble we've got in this wheel. It's got a little more than what I was expecting, frankly. You can see there's zero. Okay, that's really the low point this way, the furthest to the left. And as I rotate the wheel around, you'll see we've got about 120 thousandths worth of wobble. Now in order to shift the rim, and since this is the high spot, in other words, it's the part of the rim right now that's closest to the indicator. So the rim is pushed over like this. What I need to do to straighten it is tighten the spokes on the opposite side of the hub that tie into this side of the hub and loosen the spokes on the opposite or this side. By loosening these and tightening the opposite, I will take the rim and I will shift it to the left, pulling it away from the indicator. So that's what we're going to do now. The highest spot, which is right there, so the spokes on this side of the rim that tie in closest to that point, which is here. I know you don't have the perspective, but it's here and here. These two spokes I'm going to tighten the most, or first, rather, I should say. And then I'm going to loosen the corresponding spokes on the opposite side, which are two right here. I'm going to bring the wheel around to the 0 mark, which is right about there. That means the wheel is furthest away from the indicator this way. I'm going to call that 0. You can see that on the dial indicator. I'm going to pull the hub with my left hand to keep tension against the head of the axle bolt so the wheel can't move. So I'm just going to keep gentle pressure and rotate it. And you can see here we're running well under 20 thousandths of an inch. Probably less than 15 thousandths of an inch. That's side to side wobble. That'd be like this. So it's pretty tight. It only took me about 5 minutes or so to true the wheel side to side. So now what I'll do is I'll reposition the indicator and we will recheck to see if we have induced or worsened our wheel hop. As you can see, I've repositioned the indicator back into the vertical, so we're going to check now for wheel hop or the vertical movement of the wheel. I've just finished truing the wheel side to side or for run out. If you recall, this is around 20 thousandths of an inch when we finish the initial adjustment, so I'll bring it around to 0. Right about there is 0. Put a little pressure on the hub to pull it out, and let's see what we've done here. Remember, we're around 20 thousandths or so before. A little bit over there, 24 thousandths. Zero mark again. We got, I think, 2 little spots about 24 thousandths of an inch. One's right there. 24 thousandths, and another one's right there. So in reality, I've reintroduced about 5 thousandths more wheel hop or vertical movement as I trued the wheel from side to side. And that's acceptable to me. I'm going to leave it where it is. Again, for the way I'm going to use this motorcycle, 25 thousandths wheel hop and less than 20 thousandths side-to-side run out is perfectly acceptable. What I will do now is I will go around and I will very carefully, using my spoke wrench, I will turn each spoke about 1/8 of a turn, and I will turn them all equally. And I have to do that because I don't want to change the truing now. But I want to make sure everything is equally tight all the way around. So I'll rotate the wheel around to the valve stem hole, which is right where my finger is here. And I'll start there working in a probably a clockwise fashion like this. I'll just each spoke about 1/8 of a turn or so. It's not the amount of turn that's important as long as they're all the same, so that I maintain the adjustment so that I don't end up with any loose spokes here. But that's the process that I use to true wheels for non-performance motorcycles. If you were to competitively ride or have a high-performance motorcycle, you'd probably want to true to a little tighter specs than what I did, but this will be fine for my purposes. So that's it for this video, folks. Truing of the front wheel of the Yamaha YL1. Any questions or comments, feel free to drop me a note. Otherwise, thanks for watching.